A human being is a part of the whole, called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts, his feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. The striving to free oneself from this delusion is the one issue of true religion. Not to nourish it, but to try to overcome it, is the way to reach the attainable measure of peace of mind.
Albert Einstein's famous quote comes from a letter he wrote in response to a bereaved father, Robert S. Marcus, who had lost his young son to the polio pandemic in 1949. Marcus had previously written to Einstein to share his grief and ask about life and death from a scientific perspective. In response, Einstein penned the quoted letter, empathetically expressing his views on life, the universe, and our interconnectedness. This message from the universe is for a potential member of the Last Religion, who left a comment on our recent video, Harmonics of the Universe, Decoding Reality with Dr. Michio Kaku and the Last Religion. The comment, which has been rephrased, expresses this thought process I will read to you now. People, or they, often say that our current reality is the most challenging dimension in which we exist. No matter the struggles we face, we should celebrate our resilience and ability to persevere. At times I contemplate the idea of ending this perceived simulation to reunite with my higher self. However, I've heard that one only returns to this realm repeatedly, which is a tough concept to accept. I, therefore, persist despite the difficulties of life. I occasionally question the intentions of my higher self in choosing to participate in this world. Is the purpose merely to endure suffering? Or perhaps am I just too audacious, repeatedly diving back into this reality, only to face hardship again and again? We will now introduce a tenet of the Last Religion before we go further, as it is in primary alignment with our spectrum of understanding, to express that. All social interactions are negotiations of validation, simultaneously a query on another's ability to navigate systems, and subsequently a request to co-resonate. Here is our answer based on our spectrum of understanding. The perception depicted in the comment just read is a shared concern and often problematic for many because it places the player character in the psychological perimeters of a game that others have crafted and you dislike, yet you have made yourself a willing participant. One of the ways we can remedy this type of mental affliction is to ask what reality is, which you can refer back to the Michio Kaku video for a breakdown, or have a listen to our audiobook, or purchase our variations of our philosophy in the links in the About section. After you categorize this belief system you are placing yourself in, let us next ask who the people you are referring to as they. We often refer to those who hold the keys to the narrative as they, as a shortcut because we subconsciously assume that they hold power over objective reality, and in many systems in life their grip is nearly inescapable, which we can see primarily through the economic factors in all our lives. However, for spiritual belief systems, the jury is still out, as they say. The they you are referring to are the following: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, Druze, certain forms of New Age spirituality, Theosophy, and finally the most impactful one, social media. Zoom out and look at this dilemma with a universal lens, and let us look at this list as variables of spiritualism. This is a list of 8 that believe in reincarnation, and then there is roughly 10,000 other esoteric belief systems that believe in something else. Key point to note here is that of those other 10K, they either changed the definition of eternal suffering or removed it altogether. As one, we are subjective, and it takes 2 or more to come together in agreement to make something seem objective. But no matter how many come together, esoteric belief systems are just an amalgamation of subjective takes on what we could say is a non-physical synesthesia, an esoterical sense, that always advertises that they seek to gain the ultimate understanding, not realizing that underlyingly the only question they really care to answer is why fire burns. Let us come to a realization and ask ourselves how many of the believers of that list of 8 take it on face value that reincarnation is true because someone said it was. The answer is all of them. However, does that make it wrong? No, all beliefs, no matter how abstract or what stage of awareness we perceive them to be, are subjectively valid. There is an understanding that we have as members of the last religion, which is that all actions from a human perspective are at the base survival. Any way we express ourselves beyond that action is cope, and anything to express that cope is embellishment, which leads us hopefully to validation. At the base of all human existence, given the nature of this reality of action and reaction, given our physical limitations in relation to our environments, we know that there is going to be relative suffering. This existential crisis we all are experiencing we call life. We, the members of the last religion, have a tenet that we bear in our minds in order to keep ourselves malleable to life's complexities that stem from cognitive dissonance and the dissonant human ambience. We see that everything manifested in this life is but a dialect of energy. The raw energy of the universe must go through a series of phase changes in order to reach our senses. Everything is information in various forms, which is why everything that humans perceive can also be expressed in mathematical terms. Therefore, anything that has manifested on this 3D canvas is by design an unsolvable mathematical expression. The reason why we say this is because most, if not all, claims in religious books of what occurred before this universe's creation begins the tale with the statement that there was nothing. Nothing would indicate mathematically to humans as zero. Therefore, any created energy must contrast the nothing, and that would indicate that there was mathematical value, meaning data condensed in space. At this point, we will not talk about where that energy came from, or the fact that there is data even when there is nothing, for that is a discussion for another day. All energy, all information, no matter what the current state it's in, is also symbolism. You may have heard of this, but it bears repeating due to the profundity of affirmations it brings us. There is a mathematical set of points expressed in an equation called the Mandelbrot Set, to which a seemingly simplistic mathematical formula reveals a complex plane, the boundary of which forms a landscape that visually can be identified as a fractal. Named after mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot, it's defined by a simple iterative equation, but as you can see, the resulting shapes are remarkably complex and intricate. To put it simply, a complex number is part of the Mandelbrot set if, when applied to a recursive or iterative equation, seen here as Zn plus 1 equals sine Zn2 plus c. Now, symbolically place your life on this Mandelbrot set. As you can see, you are zooming into what seems like infinity. You see intricacy, but you also see self-similarity. The variation of colors are used to indicate the boundaries of stability of the equation, and can also be seen symbolically as variety of aspects of the human equation of life. There is no deception in this graphic display. It's true that you can continue to zoom into this 2D or 3D landscape forever. From a simple equation, even though it has a mind-blowing complexity about it, the symbolic sum can never dream of approaching infinity. As humans, we cannot approach, cannot reach, cannot comprehend the infinite. Humans are limited in all aspects, and the universe is infinite in all aspects. So, in reference to the original comment when questioning the futility of returning to the source of pain, you can find it equal to an infinite shoreline, like when zooming into a single point on the Mandelbrot set. Therefore, human suffering is too seemingly endless if you define or linger on that point if you will it to be. Looking back to the letter Einstein wrote to the grieving father who questions the purpose of pain and reality, and to loss, we now add the symbolism which should suffice as a transcendental affirmation, as it does for we, the members of the last religion. Einstein says, "We experience the self, our thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, underlyingly, a kind of optical illusion of our consciousness." The striving to free oneself from this illusion should be the only purpose of true religion. Not to nourish the delusion, but to strive to overcome it mentally, is the only way to reach the human level of attainable measure of peace of mind. Full stop. Ergo, to overcome, a reconceptualization of your belief system is in order. To alleviate yourself from this suffering is to change your perspective as to what suffering truly is, and whether or not it is required of you to reach a new level of existence. We ask ourselves if we are extensions of God, then why do we limit ourselves in thinking that we must live a life of suffering, then die, and then be brought back to do it all over again? There is one more quote I would like to refer to by philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, one which I will probably utilize in another video down the road, which is, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. Because if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you." Full stop. You are defined in the moment, not from past pains, nor in fear of future ones, because if you choose to, then you are a bird in this universe-sized gilded cage. Furthermore, if we combine this perspective when viewing philosophies and religions and businesses, etc., we can clearly see which ones have, as Friedrich Nietzsche stated, become a relative monster. We can also see nodes of symbolic connection when looking at this dilemma in other dialects of energy. Everything exists in a superposition, and in quantum mechanics, when zooming in to measure the finite quantum energy, you get a collapse of the wave function, the edge of our human ability, the edge of our spectrum of understanding, which means that everything in the world seems coherent until you try to finitely measure it. Remember to not confuse this with classical terms. If we were to take knowledge from the Eastern philosophy, Taoism/Taoism, that the symbol popularly known as the yin and the yang is actually encompassed by a third aspect. Free your mind and soul and train yourself away from looking at life as wholly dualistic. It can be hard to conceptualize because of the dissonant human ambience of life we visualize in the yin-yang. We see the two pieces as spinning, but notice that the two pieces also form a whole piece, yet exist separate from each other simultaneously. Some here might now visualize the Holy Trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Therefore, do not settle for a system that limits you to only an on and off position, when there is a third aspect that is the z-axis to this 3D plane. Once you understand the x and the y, you will z everything. Aside from clever quips, we should see where the universe's gift of choice comes into play. You can choose to redefine suffering in your life. Instead of viewing it as an endless cycle of pain, you can program yourself to see it as a catalyst for growth. Adopt a mindset that transforms suffering into wisdom, patience, resilience, or compassion. This doesn't mean you ignore pain or hardship, but rather learn from it and use it as a stepping stone towards personal and spiritual growth. Realize underlyingly that you already have a multiplicity of belief systems within you, but you and many other folks out there are trapped in a single belief system. Many see the world as ones and zeros, but we, the members of the last religion, also see the universe existing in a cloud of probability, as we are free to choose to also look at reality through the lens of quantum mechanics. It is not 1 and 0, but both simultaneously. Everything exists in a superposition, which means that everything seems coherent until you try to finitely measure it. Given the dilemma at hand, it makes sense to question any topic under the sun up until a point. But beyond that, know this. At all times, when attempting to look further than your subjective spectrum of understanding, even with the cognizance that human understanding is an ever-evolving amalgamation of problem-solving algorithms, in the beyond, no matter the horizon, or mathematical formula, or coping method, you will always return to that infinite shoreline, or what Hinduism might refer to as the neti-neti. The answer is not this nor that, but is wholly inconceivable. Our coping methods to life are sometimes tested to the limits, as it was for the commenter and for the grieving father in Einstein's letter, and for billions upon billions of people that have lived throughout history, which, given the environmental factors of our lives, statistically brings us all back to trying to solve for the ultimate X. So, for the terminal suffering of humans experience, we suggest adopting an empathetic version of the philosophy of the Stoic perspective. The personification we, the members of the last religion, authored, we call the chemistry of the self, seen here in the caption, and which you can see more of in our book, or in various videos on this channel, bequeaths us with a subjective set of tools, given the limitations of the human spectrum of understanding, of skills we humans always wrongly assume to be optimally honed ones. Therefore, do not settle with adapt and survive. Think instead to evolve and thrive. We have covered a plan for the body. Now we make plans for expanding your spiritual awareness in order to alleviate the suffering of the soul. Like the universe, which exists and utilizes a multiplicity of energy, we too can cease to limit ourselves. Therefore, we choose to adopt a spiritual philosophy that does not require an eternal toll to pay in order to get where we think we are going. Cycles are for humans, multiverses and infinite possibilities are for the gods. No religion objectively places limitations on their God, so why should we underlyingly continue to? If God is infinitely powerful, and if there are infinite realities, then who is to say that once you die, you do not get to create one yourself? Stop hindering the universe from manifesting in your life. Note that some religions and philosophies do this but still hobble themselves in other aspects. When adopting this new perspective, the only thing we ask is that you keep your feet planted in the primary. In other words, do not get lost in mysticism, or what Einstein referred to in his letter as nourishing delusion, which we, the members of the last religion, refer to as the tertiary practices, as a way to tend to your gardens of cognitive dissonance. An expansion on this topic can be found in our book and coming videos. To do this, we, the members of the last religion, bear in mind this system we crafted called the hierarchy of belief affirmations, or the HOBA, which is broken down into 3 categories. Primary affirmations, scientific and historical information that is considered commercialized, objective facts, and is ubiquitous worldwide. Secondary affirmations, social information that is formed by subjective but logical conclusions. Tertiary affirmations, deep esoteric spiritual cultural understandings, mystical heightened emotional states felt after finding a system that helps sustain and reinforce us during exploration of this existential experience. We must decline to identifying what tertiary practices are, because we understand that all affirmations are subjectively valid. Therefore, tertiary practices are too, especially because they are attempting to make sense of the infinite shoreline, but know that they will always be at best served with a label that reads, "User experience may vary." Therefore, the objective validity to the practice will always be questionable. And side note, that this is the reason why there has always been a definite line between science and religion. We, the members of the last religion, believe that the essence of human life is the sacrament of the divine existence. We are of God, are extensions of God. We are literally teaching ourselves a thing or two about this level of existence. Therefore, the only natural recourse is to introduce another variable, this belief system, the philosophy of the last religion, into the list of possibilities as a valid belief system, and when 2 or more are in agreement, we encompass the third aspect, which, if you are still here, I would think you are in agreement with me by now. If so, then our intent is on its way to be manifested in this reality. This unique spectrum of understanding, this variable, should be an overlay of a philosophy, and never one that contends with existing systems of belief. The last religion has all 3 aspects of the HOBA, which is why, to keep it wholly legitimate objectively, we, the members of the last religion, respectfully decline dissonance, and tertiary practices that place humans, while living this life, as those who have been imbued with mystical powers, or sell them. This is not a step back from humankind's evolutionary progress, because we define that type of progress as fully derived from the primary and secondary aspects of the HOBA. Therefore, for the last religion, our tertiary affirmations are wholly derived from primary and secondary practices, to which we have defined in our book, which will be manifesting soon in coming videos like this one. Anything beyond that is a nourishment of illusory nature for the sake of gaining coping methods which only help to inflate the ego, rather than striking at the underlying problem that caused the need for such abstractions. We see those perceptions as reflected as fractal recursion of the Mandelbrot set, a game within a game. Again, for reference, now modified for the expansion of your spectrum of understanding. All actions, including especially tertiary practices, from a human perspective, are at the base survival, no matter how abstract they may be. Any way we express ourselves beyond that action is a coping method to dealing with the unknown, and anything to express that coping method is embellishment, which leads us hopefully to validation. The reason why I state this again is so that you may consider how you came to believe in reincarnation in the first place. Finally, let's talk practically of the belief system where a person returns to this world to live another life. Often when it comes to human knowledge, philosophers surmise it to pretty much equate to 0, no matter what factors into it. After all, to quote Einstein once again, who admitted that, "The more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know." At this point, it is not an abstraction if we state that Einstein in his own way was referring to the attempt of zooming into the infinite shoreline. However, note that how Einstein went about doing that, his measurements were wholly based in the primary and secondary practices. Therefore, we can conceptualize that it could take numerous lifetimes to quote-unquote learn. But ultimately, in our 3D shell, we never really know anything, which of course is a paradox. But it is a paradox by design, which, if you think on it with introspection and utilize the message from the universe, our last religion's great manifesto, then you will find the underlying reasoning. Furthermore, we ask, what would a human have to offer to the universal perspective but its own 3D definitions? Think quickly what a 1D creature's experiences could sound like to a 3D human. Beyond that, not forgetting that this is all hypothetical, once you shed this mortal coil, your consciousness expanding to the ends of the universe, having returned to the Godhead, then we presume that the life you once knew becomes smaller than the smallest measurement known to man, called the Planck length. This, I believe, is why NDEs, or near-death experiences, all report a newfound love for their renewed lease on life. That is, of course, if those recounts are true, and not concoctions of those who wish to embellish their belief system in order to project its validity. This reminds us of a passage from our great manifesto, the message from the universe. Last paragraph. Look beyond if you truly wish to see the source. You simply remove all vibrations, after all is silent. You will know how truly precious you are. Therefore, the idea that there is a chance for return is because it is all that most humans can perceive, because they long for a continuation to experience in whatever capacity that may be. Therefore, aspire to expanding your spectrum of understanding pragmatically, while not utilizing tertiary coping practices. Naturally expanding your consciousness, logically speaking, would in turn expands the possibilities for more. We think infinitely more. This is but one aspect of the capacity and aspirations that is the belief system we members refer to as the last religion. Thank you for giving us the chance to share our spectrum of understanding and subsequently resonating with us.